Hi, everyone. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're joining us. And welcome to our webinar today, Understanding the Basics of DBT. This is a 4-part foundational skills series, and this is session 2, Strategies for Distress Tolerance. Next slide, please. This webinar is sponsored by the Northeast and Caribbean Mental Health Technology Transfer Center, or MHTTC. We're housed at Rutgers in the School of Health Professions in the Department of Psychiatric Rehabilitation and Counseling Professions. My name is Kathy, and I'm the project coordinator of this center, and I'll be introducing our webinar and presenter today. Our center is funded by SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, to enhance the capacity of the behavioral health workforce to deliver evidence-based and promising practices to individuals with mental health conditions. We also address the full continuum of services spanning mental illness prevention, treatment, and recovery supports. And we provide training-related workforces, such as police, first responders, primary care providers, vocational services, etc., and to provide effective services to people with mental health conditions. We also utilize supplemental funding to support school teachers and staff to address student mental health. Next slide, please. As a reminder, all of our training programs featured on your screen, as well as products and services, are available to you at no cost. Thank you. If you're interested in staying up to date with the events and products that our center is providing, we ask that you please sign up to receive our email communications. You may do so by scanning the QR code provided on your screen. Following the webinar, you'll be asked to complete a brief survey. We value this feedback and use it to improve our activities and inform our future activities. These surveys are also important because our continued funding is linked to them. We thank you in advance for your participation. Next slide, please. We also want to let you know that this webinar is being recorded and will be posted on our website within 7 days of this webinar broadcast. You will also receive a link to download your certificate of attendance, as well as a link to download a PDF version of our presenter slides. At the time of this presentation, Marian Delphin Rittman served as Acting Assistant Secretary for the Mental Health and Substance Use at SAMHSA. The opinions expressed herein are the views of the speakers and do not reflect the official position of the Department of Health and Human Services or SAMHSA. No official support or endorsement of DHHS or SAMHSA for the opinions described in this presentation is intended or should be inferred. We encourage you to interact with our presenter during the webinar by using the chat feature. Please post any comments or questions you have in the chat, and I will collect your questions as we go and ask them of the presenter during the Q&A time towards the end of the presentation. During the webinar, our presenter may pose questions to you, so please feel free to use the chat feature to answer them. The MHTTC network is committed to using affirming, respectful, and recovery-oriented language in all of its products and activities. Next slide, please. We also wanted to let you know that the new 3-digit dialing code for the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline is now available. 988 is not just a suicide crisis line. It is for people experiencing a suicidal, mental health, or substance use crisis of any kind of emotional distress. It's also for people who are concerned about someone experiencing an emotional crisis. You can connect by calling or texting 988, or you can chat online at 988lifeline.org. Calls, texts, or chats are responded to by a trained crisis counselor. Next slide, please. Now let's begin our webinar. We have Crystal Socha with us today. Crystal is a PhD candidate and a senior training and consultation specialist at Rutgers School of Health Professions in the Department of Psychiatric Rehabilitation and Counseling Professions. Crystal's primary role includes providing in-person and remote training, consultation, and technical assistance to New Jersey agencies that provide community support services. She has over 10 years of experience in the behavioral health field, delivering trauma-informed, culturally responsive, gender-affirming care and supporting individuals in building a life worth living. Before joining Rutgers, she provided recovery-oriented services in supportive housing, intensive in-home and in-community settings, community mental health centers, integrated primary care, hospital systems, and private practices. She has received a 40-hour foundational training in dialectical behavioral therapy, DBT, by a Linehan board-certified clinician and utilizes a DBT-informed approach within her work as a counselor. Again, welcome everyone, and I will turn it over to Crystal.
Thank you so much again. Welcome everyone. It's good to see some familiar names back here today. As Kathy mentioned, we are in our foundational skills series. It is a 4-part series, so you are joining us on session 2, which again is strategies for distress tolerance. I want to get started just by talking a little bit about our objectives, and we'll talk a moment, if you were here last week, following up on some homework that was provided to you. Hopefully it wasn't too difficult, but let's take a moment and begin. So welcome. Some learning objectives. Again, this session is really geared towards all things distress tolerance. So we'll talk about the difference between crisis survival skills versus reality acceptance skills, both housed under the distress tolerance module. So we'll take some time really spending the duration of this hour today talking about the 2 different groups of distress tolerance skills. I'll try to weave in some examples throughout, and we do have a case study at the end as well. So checking in, I will launch a poll. If you got a chance, you should see a poll popping up on your screen. Did you get a chance to practice a mindfulness skill? Yes, no, or perhaps you didn't attend that first session, and no worries, welcome today. Give it just a moment. Seeing lots of yeses. All right, I'm seeing the polls slow down a little bit. Okay, so I'm seeing many yeses for those who did get a chance to practice a mindfulness skill. Some of us did not. And some of us were not here just yet. So you'll see that. For those of us who did get a chance to practice that mindfulness skill, I'm going to launch another poll. So if you did indeed practice a mindfulness skill, which did you practice? So last time we talked about the mindfulness what skills, which was observe and describe your environment using your 5 senses. The mindfulness how skill, we talked about one mindfulness, which was really doing one thing at a time. So if you're talking, talk, if you're eating, eat, if you're walking, walk. And we also talked about the 3 states of mind. So maybe you had a chance to recognize or notice when you were in your reasonable or rational mind, when you were in your emotional mind, or when you were really accessing your wise mind. Perhaps you practiced a different mindfulness skill, and feel free to let me know in the chat what that was. And again, if you weren't here last time, no worries. More to come today. Give it just another moment here. All right. So I'm ending that poll, and you'll see the results on your end. It should still say, or you should still see the poll on your screen. I'm seeing majority of us did practice that mindfulness how skill, and then some of us did practice the what, or noticing those 3 states of mind. So if you could, if you're feeling confident and brave, let me know what went well in the chat, as well as what was difficult or perhaps challenging in practicing these skills. And feel free to be as open and honest, or maybe take a seat back if not. Diane, I see 5 senses, skill went well. Wonderful. What about others? Adrienne, hopefully I'm pronouncing your name correctly. You mentioned not allowing the mind to wander, focus. Yeah, and mindfulness really is all about simply noticing that mind wandering and doing your best to bring it back. See, Keisha, you practice a different skill, progressive muscle relaxation, which actually ties into what we're doing today. I'm seeing some others practice the house skill, and it was hard because I'm always multitasking. Yes, it's so hard to just sit and be and do one thing at a time. Remaining focused on one thing at a time was a challenge. Yeah. I do challenge you to even practice for, try 30 seconds, try 1 minute, and then kind of build that time up as you go along. Or maybe there's easier things to do that you can do one thing at a time. Maybe it's hard to do one thing at a time when you're, clocked in on the job. Maybe it's easier to do things when you're out in nature or when you're out, visiting a loved one. I'm not allowing outside noise distracting my task at hand. Rachel says, how to keep reminding myself not to think about my to-do list and letting myself know there was nothing else I needed to be doing. Yeah. Simply being and simply existing in this moment. We all have a super long to-do list, so I give you lots of credit for that. Justine says, noticing and observing helped me then change behavior. Wonderful. Awesome. So again, if you didn't get a chance to practice, as Kathy mentioned, these PowerPoint slides will be shared with you, so feel free to take a look. And Amy says, logical emotional mind recognition. It's hard when triggered to slow it down, but noticing what is an emotional response and bringing myself out of it and into a logical mindset. Yes, all of these skills do take, again, time, practice, energy, effort, commitment, and very much easier said than done. So I do encourage you all to practice, especially if you plan to teach these skills to your clients and the people that you're serving. It's much easier to know how this skill really works in its entirety versus reading it from a worksheet, talking about it with your client may not have the same effect. Although, acknowledging that we only have so much time in a day, but hopefully you can practice many of these skills before bringing them to your clients. All right. I will keep it moving. Again, we are covering distress tolerance today. Last week we talked about mindfulness and we still have 2 more modules to go. So we are going to get into distress tolerance, and I won't even give a sneak peek just yet. You'll hear more in just a moment. But I'm going to ask us to take a moment to pause together. And so I'm going to start off with a sensory awareness exercise and encourage you all. Again, I can't see you all, so I'm hoping that you feel comfortable in participating with this activity with me together. And I will read a script and some questions, and you will just simply notice what's happening, what's coming up for you. So if you feel comfortable, again, your choice, finding a comfortable grounded position, perhaps planting your feet to the ground or to the earth. If you feel comfortable, perhaps closing your eyes or using a downward gaze. And simply starting off with a deep cleansing breath in through your nose and out through your mouth. And now in your mind, rate your current level of distress from 0 to 100. Staying in this position, simply listening to each question that I ask, and notice what occurs before I ask the next question. There's no right or wrong responses, just notice your reaction to each question. So let's begin. Can you feel your hair touching your head? Can you feel your chest rising and falling as you breathe? Can you feel the space between your eyes? Can you feel the distance between your ears? Can you feel your breath touching the back of your eyes while you inhale? Can you picture something far away? Can you notice your arms touching your body? Can you feel the bottoms of your feet? Can you imagine a beautiful day at the beach? Can you notice the space within your mouth? Can you feel a breeze against your cheek? Can you feel how one arm is heavier than the other? Can you feel how one arm is more relaxed than the other? Can you feel a change in the temperature in the air around you? Can you imagine something very pleasant? Can you imagine what it would feel like to float on a cloud? Can you imagine floating in warm water? Can you feel your face getting soft? Can you imagine a beautiful flower? Take in another deep cleansing breath, in through your nose and out through your mouth. And whenever you're ready, bringing yourself back to the room. Maybe you should take in a moment to stretch if you need. And checking in with you all. I know there's many of us here, so thank you for taking that time with me if you did get a chance. What was that like for you? And same as homework, was it difficult? Was it challenging? What went well? Yes, happy to share it as well. I'm seeing a lot of so relaxing. Some things I couldn't feel, but I knew was real. Yes, it kind of makes you think for a moment. Calmness, quiet calm, much better. Feeling very relaxed. Hopefully we're not ready for a nap, but hopefully that was, as someone mentioned, very centering. And Lizzie, thank you for that. Yeah, it can be hard to focus and stay focused on that calmness. And absolutely the ability to use body and breath to reset. I find this so helpful, especially if you're running groups with individuals, using this as a starting exercise. And thank you, Mabel, centering, including your calm, soothing voice. People have asked me to record this before. I encourage you to find someone's voice that you perhaps find calming and have them record it or have yourself record it. And then listening to this, usually we encourage a longer pause, but for the sake of our time, hopefully that was, enough to get us really grounded and centered. So thank you for participating in that. And again, absolutely, we'll share this specific handout as well. There's a couple more questions. There's about 30, and I think I went through almost 20 of them. So a couple more that could be helpful. All right. So we are now going to transition out of this pause. Thank you again for that. And I'm going to ask us, and feel free to use the chat to respond to this question. But what are some examples of situations where individuals that you work with feel distressed, overwhelmed, or perhaps another intense emotion? And if it's hard to think about perhaps a client, maybe thinking about a personal example, if you feel comfortable sharing, let me know in the chat. What are some examples? Interpersonal conflict, especially with family, single parenting, finals and graduation, being overworked, noise, terminal medical conditions, school finals, college graduating. Yeah, kind of these periods of transition in life. Homelessness, housing instability, documentation, yes. Custody battle. I see someone, Lizzie works at the children's hospital. All of the clients tend to be stressed while here. Difficult conversations with family. For clients, court issues, legal issues, job stress, not feeling seen or heard. Yeah. Being around a family member who abused them, food insecurity, stimulus from people engagement. A student who becomes overwhelmed when a known teacher leaves the school. Yeah. It's so interesting because all counseling we may consider to be grief counseling. There's so many layers of grief and loss that happen throughout a person's life. Medical terminal diagnosis, lack of empathy, compassion, health anxiety. Yes. So keeping some of those situations in mind, have the individuals that you worked with, or if these are personal examples, have they or you ever been so angry, so sad, so distressed, so overwhelmed that perhaps, or even excited, because that is an intense emotion, that you or they may have acted on these emotions without thinking and perhaps made things worse? Absolutely, yes. And keep in mind what we covered last week. And if you weren't here, we talked about the biosocial model and individuals who may have an invalidating environment and have a strong genetic vulnerability to emotional vulnerability. Yes. And often, again, clients too manage these difficult situations by perhaps using ineffective skills, using no skills, making things worse, not getting likes on social media. Yeah. Social media is a big one. Okay. So keep these situations in mind as we move forward, because I really like to talk about red zone and blue zone when I'm talking about helping individuals really identify where they are at emotionally. And I'm sure we've used or seen, or perhaps if you're familiar with, using a thermometer or 0 to 10 to measure kind of a person's emotional state. So when we talk about red zone versus blue zone, we're keeping in mind that individuals that we serve often have this, again, predisposition to emotional vulnerability. And what that means is that they have higher levels of sensitivity, reactivity, and with that, there's a slower return to baseline. Because emotions and reactions are so immediate and so high, it's much harder to get back down. So when someone's in red zone, this person is in a crisis state, meaning their emotions are hot. So they could be feeling anger, irritability, overwhelm. They may also notice some physiological changes and behavior changes. What are some things that happen think about yourself when you're feeling angry? What happens within your body when you're angry or irritable, overwhelmed? Sweating, heart race, yeah. Palms are sweating, feeling kind of hot, this hotness in your body, crying, hyperventilating, chest tightness, flushed face. Yes, can't think. Absolutely. Feeling jittery. Yeah. So it could be any of the following: tightness, aches, fingers tingle. Yeah, and this looks different for everyone. So really helping this person to identify what this is like for them. And someone mentioned it is so hard to think clearly and to make decisions when we are in this state. So I really like to think of red zone being within that 6 to 10 on that 0 to 10 scale. Versus the opposite, when we are, and I'm seeing other examples, loss of appetite, dysregulated nervous system, yes. When we're in that blue zone, individuals might be still feeling a little upset, kind of having this emotional hangover, but there could be a sense of calmness, or they're starting to unwind. They're starting to get perhaps a little more grounded. They're able to think a little more clearly. They are a little more alert. Feels doable, yes. They're able to self-soothe. And most importantly, it's easier to be skillful in this state. So the goal is really to help individuals get back into their blue zone, or the zone in which they can think clearly, be aware of their feelings, connect with others and themselves, and function most effectively. Able to listen, yes. And not to confuse this with perhaps if you're familiar with the window of tolerance, hypoarousal versus hyperarousal, a little bit different, because sometimes when we're in hypoarousal, there's still this level of dissociation. Yes, can be intentional, being able to notice and pivot. Absolutely. We've got some experts here. All right. So I'll keep it moving. When we're looking at distress tolerance, the main goal really here is to acknowledge that these are skills that help individuals when they have really intense pain that cannot be solved quickly or immediately or in that moment. And pain is really a part of the human experience. We know that we can't avoid pain. So these skills really help individuals to tolerate some of those painful events without making them worse, and to reduce suffering by accepting reality. So we want to teach clients in the short term that they can survive these difficult moments when they need to be productive or they're emotionally overwhelmed. And they can bring that pain down to a manageable level so that they can still function effectively and that crisis can be managed. And what I like to really emphasize here is that we know this skill is working when this person is not acting on any dangerous, self-destructive, or impulsive behaviors. So this person might say, well, Crystal, I don't feel any better. I still feel horrible. Okay, and did you engage in self-harm? No. Okay, great. Did you have a drink? No. Okay, great. And of course, having a longer conversation, but those moments mean more than this person might realize. So again, the skill is working if this person is not doing anything to hurt themselves or others in any way. And so with distress tolerance and specifically crisis survival skills, there's a core group of skills that you'll see here. And again, these are the skills that are helpful for tolerating painful events, urges, or emotions when you can't make things better right away. So you really just need to get through that difficult moment. It's impossible to solve that problem right now. You need to get through this highly stressful situation. This pain isn't going to last forever, but you need to get through it right now because perhaps you're at work or you're at an important meeting or you're at a family function and perhaps there's no possibility of removing yourself in that moment. The goal is not to forever use these skills and overuse them. A lot of what Marsha Linehan talks about is not overusing distress tolerance skills because we don't want to avoid every unwanted emotion for the rest of our lives. But it is helpful, again, when this person has the urge to act on some of those emotions that could be dangerous or destructive. Okay. So we'll cover most of these today, and I will jump right in. Is anyone familiar with some of these skills? I'll go back do any of these look familiar to anyone? If so, which one? Some of them. Tip, stop skill, yes. And ride the wave, we'll talk about more specifically in emotion regulation as well. 5 senses, distract the wise mind. If not, no worries. Again, this is intended to be a really high-level overview, so we'll touch on many of these briefly, but there are corresponding handouts with these worksheets, or with these skills rather, that provide both a handout and a worksheet. So a skill with what it is and a corresponding homework handout. So, great. When we're talking about distress tolerance, again, these are crisis survival skills, and the first is the stop skill. And it really is how it sounds. So when someone's emotions take over, it can be so hard, again, to think clearly. And often these individuals act or respond quickly onto some of these emotions. Maybe people turn to pushing emotions away. Maybe people, again, with a strong or a predisposition to emotional vulnerability, may act on these behaviors and engage in impulsive behaviors without thinking. So when someone wants to act or has this urge to act on an impulse, they may not have time to use their skills in that moment. So we want to talk about how we can take a moment to pause, stop, and freeze. So the first part of the stop skill is to literally stop. And this is, freezing in your tracks, whether this is physically, kind of where you are in that moment. It doesn't have to be like freeze dance. But in that moment, noticing that you perhaps could be having this urge to go to the liquor store. And so I've had individuals print out a stop sign or put a stop sign on the background of their phone, put it on the door between them and where they need to get out of their room. That could be quite distressing. So they're taking a moment to literally stop. We're then taking a step back, literally, or again, emotionally. We are encouraging this person to take a deep breath, remind them that they are not their emotion, that this pain is temporary, observing what's coming up for them. So asking, what's happening for me? What are they feeling? What are their thoughts? Again, simply noticing as we did with that mindfulness observe skill. And then finding a way to proceed mindfully. So having this person ask themselves, what do I want from this situation? What are my goals? What choice might I make or engage in that might make things better or worse? And this is so important to really practice when a person is in their blue zone or is in a state of calmness. Think about using this when you are in your red zone for the first time. It might be so hard to really access these skills. So keep that in mind. So stop, taking a step back, observing what's coming up, proceeding mindfully. And again, this may not work the first time, but it is really about practice. The next distress tolerance skill are the tip skills. And I saw many of us were familiar with these, and you may be familiar with the temperature piece. So the first part of this tip acronym is temperature. So we're tipping the temperature of our body. As we mentioned, when we're feeling angry or overwhelmed, there's this sense of hotness, these physiological changes in our body, heart's racing. I would like to preface to ensure that individuals consult with a healthcare provider if they have any medical issues, particularly a heart condition or if they're on a beta blocker. But this skill is designed to trick your body into thinking that you are swimming in cold water. And this is really helpful, especially when you're thinking about mammals. So when mammals swim in cold water, it is important for them to do so, and their heart rate decreases so that they increase their likelihood of survival. So this sympathetic nervous system is activated, their fight or flight. And by using the tip skill or dipping their head into cold water, they're able to activate that rest and digest, which calms them. So for this, I'd like to encourage to get a bowl of cold water. I find this quite challenging because I don't have bowls that are large enough, but some people do. And filling the bowl with cold water and ice. having this person hold their breath, plunging their face into the water for 30 to 60 seconds or whatever is bearable. It's not intended to be entirely uncomfortable. I've also encouraged to use an ice pack if you're working in a group setting. I have gotten agencies to obtain those freezer ice packs that you just crack and can put on perhaps the temples or cheeks or back of your neck or forehead. I've also been able to access ice cubes when we're working in group settings and clients need to be removed from the group, bringing a cup of ice, splashing your face with cold water if that's possible. Some people like ice cold showers. Again, this is intended to be for a short period of time. Intense exercise is the next piece here. So ideally you're engaging for something for 20 to 30 minutes. So this has a rapid effect on your mood. Keep in mind, depending on this person's relationship with their body, as well as with food, keep in mind how some of these skills may be tailored. I've changed this to intentional exercise. So perhaps, doing something that feels right for this person's body. Someone earlier mentioned paced breathing, so slowing down the pace of your breath. This could look like, breathing in for 4 seconds, exhaling for 5 seconds, holding for 6 seconds, whatever that looks like, to really slow down that heart rate. As well as paired muscle relaxation, which is another thing that someone mentioned. So tensing and relaxing different parts of your body. And this can be as long as 45 minutes and as short as a few minutes. And some of these skills, again, that we'll go through, no one really knows that you're doing them. So it can be helpful to practice in a variety of environments. But this one, again, is quick, fast acting, especially with the temperature, if this is feasible for the person that you're working with. Another one that we talk about with distress tolerance is wise mind accepts. So it's distracting with this acronym wise mind accepts. And again, with these skills and with using a distraction can help this person avoid a dangerous behavior, but again, not overusing to the point where they forever avoid feeling their feelings. But when that emotional pain is too overwhelming, we want to talk about distraction. So this handout provides you with a list of activities and different skills and tools that can be helpful. But with activities, thinking about activities like crossword puzzles, whatever this person likes, playing a sport, reading a book, anything that might offer them a temporary distraction. Contributing, this might look like volunteering, helping a friend, baking a cake for a neighbor, writing a card to someone, asking how someone else is feeling. With comparisons, and this one, it can be quite challenging, but comparing how you're feeling now to a time when you felt different. Maybe there was another time in your life where you thought you couldn't get through this moment and you did. With emotions, so perhaps experiencing a different emotion. So if you're feeling sadness, you don't want to go and listen to your saddest playlist on your phone, and you don't want to go watch a horribly sad movie, although that can be productive for some in that moment. But perhaps giving yourself a time limit. What I do encourage is perhaps doing something to experience a different emotion. So if you're feeling sadness, can you watch a scary movie? You might feel a different emotion in that moment. Pushing away, so this could be leaving things behind physically or emotionally. If you ever heard of individuals kind of putting their thoughts in a box and putting them on a shelf, maybe writing them down on a piece of paper and putting them into an envelope and sticking the envelope, in a box in their closet. And then with thoughts, so distracting with other thoughts. So this could be singing a song out loud. This could be counting bricks on the wall. Or I worked with someone who had really an extensive dental history, traumatic dental history. And this person was able to count the ceiling pieces that were at the dentist's office while he was there. Maybe counting backwards from threes. The P from tip was paced breathing as well as paired muscle relaxation. You're welcome. And then with sensation. So like we mentioned in tip, perhaps this is a distraction through a hot or cold shower, holding ice, listening to music, however that looks. Another distraction is self-soothing with those five senses. And we talked a little bit about this, but in a different way. So I included some things. I'm a big bunny fan as well. So using self-soothe as a way to find comfort, nurturing, peace, kind of this sense of being mindfully kind to yourself. And self-soothing really helps individuals to reduce that vulnerability to their emotion mind, because now you're offering yourself with comfort, and now you're able to tolerate some of that pain. So with vision, and feel free to share some examples that work for you in the chat as well. I only included a few, and this worksheet includes so many more. But with vision, perhaps this means, using self-soothe to look at the stars or nature. With hearing or sound, we're listening to calming music, or nature, waves, birds, rainfall. With smell, perhaps that's our favorite soap, lotion, candle. Again, this is something that we enjoy, not something that we find. Perhaps there's a scent that you've passed by the mall at Bath and Body Works and it's overwhelming. You want a scent that's nurturing and supportive and comforting. Maybe reminds you of a memory. Favorite food or drink, again, keeping in mind a person's relationship with food. This might look like, a hot tea, a hot chocolate. And with touch, so perhaps petting a comfort item, an animal, a blanket, your dog, your cat, your bunny. Maybe a childhood blanket that you've had for some time, stuffed animal, if you're, whoever you're working with. Monica says, my students like to look at pictures of pets. Yeah, I mean, I do too. So I get that. I get that. So really tailoring this to the person that you're working with. And I really encourage creating distress tolerance or self-soothe kits so that this person can take one of each of these items, put it into a bag, a Ziploc bag, into a backpack, stick it in a drawer next to them at work, bring it with them when they're going to difficult situations, put one in their car, so that they have access to all of these things in various locations. So checking in with you all, what is a place that is safe and secure to you, either real or imagined? The beach, my bedroom, my car, home, losing myself in a good book, mountains, church, riding my horse in the woods, sitting outside with nature, yoga mat, being alone, home in the country, home, lots of home. Beach. I find running to be a safe, secure place for me. Yeah. Mom's house. Clouds. Worship music, reading the Bible, the beach. Awesome. Weightlifting, gym time. So this looks different for everyone. And I use this as an introduction into this next skill, which is distress tolerance, improving the moment. And improving the moment is really replacing some of those immediate, distressing, unwanted events with more positive ones. This also is particularly useful when someone's feeling really overwhelmed, and self-soothing is not working, asking what this person can do in that moment to improve that moment. So the first one is imagery. So we talked about whether this is a real or imagined place, identifying that safe or secure place. This can be with mental visualization or actually going there, being there. Again, practicing this several times if you are using an imagined place. With meaning, so finding or creating meaning in that moment. This is kind of like that analogy of making lemonade out of lemons. It can be difficult in that moment, but perhaps there's a silver lining. With prayer, if this is something that the person you're working with does believe in, whether it's God or a higher power, and this isn't prayer of asking like, why me? Why is this happening to me? But rather exploring radical acceptance, which we'll talk about later in this presentation. With relaxing actions, so this might look like doing things to find a sense of comfort, and you'll notice many of these skills overlap. But what offers this person a sense of relaxation? Doing one thing in the moment. So this is similarly to that one mindfulness skill. This could simply be acknowledging, I'm just in this moment, just this breath, acknowledging what's happening for me, focusing on this present moment. With a vacation, and this doesn't mean take a month-long vacation to Bora Bora. This means taking a vacation perhaps from adulthood, taking vacation or kind of regrouping. This is not intended to happen for a long period of time and no longer than a day, but really allowing this person to retreat into a place that offers a sense of safety and allowing this person to take care of themselves. And then with encouragement, so this is what you think about when you hear positive affirmations, cheerleading, encouraging this person to get through this moment. This could look like saying things like, I'm doing the best I can. This pain is temporary. I'll be okay. And having this person identify with their own voice, kind of some of those self-statements as well. This could also look like, how would you talk to yourself, or how would you speak to a loved one who was in this similar situation, pulling from other modalities? Talking to yourself as someone you love would talk to you, because it can be quite challenging to think of kind and compassionate things when we're in such a distressing place. Okay. So again, you'll see this acronym here. And again, all of these worksheets and handouts do provide additional examples. So I just gave a couple for each, but keep in mind there's so many more. Okay. So we're going to transition in the remainder of our time into reality acceptance skills, and we'll just cover a couple of these. But with reality acceptance, this is really to accept reality as it sounds in the moment as it is, especially when it's not the life that you want. Allowing this distress to come into your life teaches you how to feel the feels really, and acknowledging that acting on some of those distressing thoughts or emotions may not be effective. So this person might be experiencing a great deal of pain or difficulty. Problem solving might not be working. They're in distress, but they're not in a crisis. And it's something painful that can't be changed. So we'll review a couple of these together. But again, the previous set of skills were really a person's in a crisis. They can't solve the problem, but they need to get through that moment. And so these set of skills will be a little bit different, and we'll talk about how they look as well. And so I share radical acceptance is probably one of the hardest skills of all time, in my personal opinion. But this really is a skill that comes into play when someone's not able to solve that problem again and no longer wishes to stay suffering. And I'll talk about in the next slide the difference between what radical acceptance is versus what it's not. But you'll see some examples here of what radical acceptance is defined as. So accepting all the way, completely and totally with your mind, body, and heart, and acknowledging that when you stop fighting reality and let go of bitterness, you're able to get through this difficult moment. Because we know that rejecting reality doesn't change reality. So avoiding reality in that moment might feel better, but it doesn't change reality and the way things are. And changing reality really requires first accepting reality. And all of this pain that we're experiencing as humans can't be avoided. And it's really nature's way of signaling that something is wrong. And as we mentioned last time, rejecting some of that reality turns pain into suffering. So suffering really comes from when people are not able to accept pain or they refuse pain. They're resisting reality in that moment. So there's a lot of resistance, and that's just the word that Marsha Linehan uses. So we want to help someone observe that they are questioning and fighting against reality, or they're saying things like, it shouldn't be this way, why me? Which happens a lot, as we know, with grief and many other circumstances. So acknowledging that this unpleasant reality is just as it is and it cannot be changed. And that's a hard truth. So I kind of created this diagram to show the difference between what acceptance is versus what it's not. So acceptance is not agreement. It's not approval. It's not giving in. It's not compassion or love towards this person who did something wrong to you. But instead, acceptance really is acknowledging what is and what does exist and letting go of fighting reality. So these were the two examples that I shared last time, and Marshall Linehan shares as well. But this combination of pain plus non-acceptance, or often referred to as resistance, leads to suffering. But pain plus acceptance leads to freedom. And pain can't be avoided. Again, it is a natural part of life. And acknowledging and encouraging this person to see that life can be worth living, even with painful events in it. The last skill that I'll cover is distress tolerance, mindfulness of current thoughts. And so these are the 4 steps that happen when someone is using this skill, which is helpful in distancing themselves from their thoughts, allowing these thoughts to kind of come up and fade away. Someone mentioned riding the wave, so pretty similar. So the first step is simply observing your thoughts and encouraging this person to simply notice what's happening for them in their mind without judgment, observing thoughts as thoughts rather than facts about the world, allowing these thoughts to simply come up and fade away, allowing them to happen for what they are, again, without judgment. The second step is really using a curious mind, asking, where do my thoughts come from? The third step, remembering that this person is not their thoughts. Maybe this person, I like to encourage clients to say, I don't normally think like this when I'm calm, or I don't normally think like this when I'm in my wise mind. These thoughts are temporary. The fourth step is encouraging this person to also remember that the point of this is not to block or suppress thoughts forever. And it's not to have an empty mind, and it's not to clear our mind of all these thoughts forever. Because as humans, we have thousands of thoughts a day, and that's normal. So again, what we're doing is simply noticing these thoughts for what they are without pushing away, without challenging them, without changing them. And with time and practice, we know that we can help clients gradually feel more and more free and less controlled by their thoughts. So keep that in mind. I like to share this poem by Rumi called Guest House. And I've used it also as an introduction in groups or shared it in group settings as well, or individual settings. But it's very natural for us to want to resist and push away difficult thoughts and emotions. So instead, this poem really encourages us to invite these thoughts in and to allow them to be present. So I'll go ahead and read this, and feel free to read along. So it says, this being human is a guest house. Every morning, a new arrival, a joy, a depression, a meanness, some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all, even if they're a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture. Still, treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice, meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whoever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond. So feel free to share any thoughts and reactions to that, or whatever just came up for you. But again, many of these skills are encouraging clients to simply notice what's coming up for them, whether it's emotions, whether it's thoughts, letting these thoughts simply pass through them without attachment, and really encourages us to kind of meet our thoughts with a sense of courage and warmth and kindness. Yeah, so true. All right. In our last few minutes, I do have a case study, maybe at least just to help get us thinking. And each of these presentations does include a case study, so feel free to go through on your own and perhaps explore how you might support this person. And this is just a brief summary of an individual So Michael is a 25-year-old Hispanic cisgender male who grew up in a high conflict household where he often witnessed arguments between his parents. As a child, he struggled with anxiety and had difficulty managing stress. Throughout his teenage years, Michael began to use alcohol as a coping mechanism, which continued into adulthood. Despite these challenges, he was able to complete his education and establish a career in marketing. However, his job involved high pressure and long hours, which exacerbated his anxiety and led to burnout. Recently, Michael was laid off from his job, and shortly afterward, his long-term relationship ended. These events triggered intense feelings of worthlessness and despair. Michael's coping strategies, such as excessive drinking and spending, have intensified, leading to strained relationships with friends, family, and financial difficulties. Michael feels overwhelmed and struggles to cope with intense emotions. He often feels he's, quote, on the verge of a breakdown and doesn't know how to manage his distress in an effective way. So, how might you use some of the distress tolerance skills that we learned, or maybe you want to throw in mindfulness from last week as well, to help Michael navigate these emotions? And feel free to share what comes to mind in the chat. Adriana says, you stop. Jillian says, acceptance. Yeah. So you'll notice there will be a combination of using those crisis survival skills. If this person is experiencing a high level of distress, we can talk about, okay, a lot of people who experience perhaps being laid off from a job, long-term relationships ending, this really intense feeling of pain. Maybe this person is questioning his own meaning and purpose. Justine says creating personalized self-soothing kit when specific triggers occur, reminders of ex-partner, new job stress. Yes. Jillian says acknowledging what is, letting go of what is not. Absolutely. And again, radical acceptance is such a difficult skill. So if you can equip this person, Michael in this instance, with some immediate short-term skills, including those crisis survival skills, can you get to a place where you can talk about radical acceptance and helping Michael to build this sense of resilience in his life? Using self-soothe sensory strategies to ground in the present moment. Laura says distraction for either drinking or spending. Yes. What can we do to help this person do something different instead of turning to alcohol or spending? Developing some healthy self-soothing skills. It sounds like alcohol and spending are currently his commonly self-soothing skills. Absolutely. Combo of grief and using rational mind. He's right. Encouraging strengths. Yes. A lot of this is honing in on what this person already innately has. What are the things that he is, inherently capable and has these strengths and is very effective in doing? Maybe in this moment there's new challenges, but how can this person effectively get through this one? 5 senses for self-soothing. Wonderful. Yes. And again, a lot of this could be crisis survival. This is something that's really difficult. Intense emotions are coming up. We're getting through this really hard time. And then we're exploring if this is kind of ongoing, how can we explore radical acceptance to make sure that Michael doesn't experience this intense suffering? Wonderful. Okay, so I hope that gave you a small tidbit or a glance as to what you could do to support someone. And I see many of you are equipped with the ability to support someone in a case like this or an instance like this. So I want to, again, just summarize. Again, we spoke about distress tolerance skills, which include crisis survival and reality acceptance, noticing the difference between crisis survival skills, which really help people to survive a crisis without making things worse, and when things can't be solved right away, versus those reality acceptance skills where individuals are really supported with reducing suffering and ultimately increasing freedom when those painful facts, situations, life events can't be changed immediately, if ever or at all. As always with homework, I'm going to share this with you. I know in our last minute here, I do encourage you to practice the distress tolerance skill, your choice. And or also practice teaching this skill to a friend or loved one. It may be difficult to teach a client right away, but encouraging you to perhaps teach this to someone that you know. As well, this was our session 2 of our four-part series, so please do join us for session 3. We'll be covering strategies for emotion regulation next week, June 18th, 12 to 1. Same resources were shared as last time, and again, those who are looking to get certified, I highly recommend Marsha Linehan's websites, which are here. Thank you so much for being here. Here's my email, but I hope to see you all next week, and I will pass it over to Kathy.
Thank you, Crystal. Thank you so much for a wonderful, informative as well as interactive webinar. We appreciate everyone for attending today. On your screen, you will see a QR code that will link you to our evaluation survey. I have also provided the link in the chat box if that is easier for you to access. As a reminder, all of our products, including the slides of today's presentation, along with the recording, the video recording, will be posted on our website within 1 week. I appreciate everyone's interaction here in the webinar. I really hope that you join us next Tuesday for session 3. The link to register will also be included in a follow-up email. Next slide, please. And we also invite you to participate in listening to our podcast, Flourishing at Work, a plan for helping professionals. You can find our channel Toward Wellness and Recovery on Spotify, Apple Music, and Podbean. Next slide, please. And if you missed any of our previous webinar recordings, you can access all of the products and resources on our catalog on our website by scanning the QR code that you see on your screen. Slide, please. As a reminder, our center does not provide CEUs. We invite you to download the presenter slides along with the certificate of completion and submit for a review to your credentialing agency. And if you'd like to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn, you may find us at Northeast and Caribbean MHTTC at the different handles that you see on your screen. I hope everyone enjoyed our webinar today, and we hope to see you next week. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Be well.